Welcome to the show. Today I wanted to show you the things I cook in my kitchen. In order to do this, we're in my kitchen. I feel pretty confident. I've got all my own equipment, all my own knives and everything, and if I run into any trouble, I've got all my mentors right behind me. So today we're going to cook a beef lasagna, a veal saltimbocca, and finish off with some Asian dumplings. So come join me in my kitchen. Lasagna is one of my favourite things to cook at home. You can cook up a nice big batch and then every night just take out one serve. It's a bit like a good wine, it gets better with age. The difference between a fantastic lasagna and a pretty average one is a really great bolognese sauce. To make this, you're going to need 500 grams of beef mince, 1 tomato, 70 grams of button mushrooms, 1 onion and 1 clove of garlic, 1/4 of a bunch of parsley, 200 grams of tomato puree, 200 mils of red wine, and some really nice olive oil. To start off with, we'll start with our onions and our garlic. You don't need to be too particular when you do this, just a nice sort of medium dice. It's really important to get a nice colour on your onions though, because that really adds a lot of flavour to your bolognese. And when you don't have too many ingredients, you need to make sure you always get the freshest ingredients. So just a nice medium heat as well. Making sure you spread it all out across so it all cooks evenly. We'll get some olive oil in there now as well. Just slicing your garlic now. Once it's in, you can turn it up to high. Making sure you keep that heat in the pan. My eyes are starting to play games already. Now put your mince in as well with your onions. And you just want all this to get a nice colour. So breaking it up. So while our meat's browning off, we can start chopping up the rest of our vegetables. Or fruit technically, but chop it up anyway. Now mushrooms. Not everyone puts mushrooms in their bolognese, but I love mushrooms, so I put them in everything. So making sure your meat's nice and brown. And this also, if you don't brown off your meat enough now, you'll get big chunks of meat in it because it won't start to break apart and form into like a saucy texture until it's all been browned off. So make sure you take your time here, don't rush this step. You can see now that all this meat's nicely browned off, and you can see all the onions have all sweated down and become clear, and you can smell all that beautiful flavour coming out. Before we go any further though, I'm going to add some salt and pepper. So plenty of black pepper and plenty of salt. This helps all the natural flavours come out and it just sort of enhances the flavours in them. So now to this we're going to add our mushrooms and our tomatoes. You'll see the mushrooms absorb all the liquid off the bottom as well, so that'll help us get some colour on it again. And while they're cooking down, we can chop up our parsley. You can put other herbs in it as well, some oregano, some basil, and some thyme if you like as well. So just a quick chop, and in that goes as well. So we want to allow this to cook down now for around 2 minutes before we add our wet ingredients. This will just mean that we get all that extra last bit of colour on it, and that the mushrooms and the tomatoes have had a chance to cook out. So now you can see that all the liquid started to come out, the mushrooms and the tomatoes, they're starting to break down a bit. It means we can add our wet ingredients. So starting off with our tomato, 200 grams. This isn't tomato paste, this is Italian tomato puree. So all it is tomatoes that have been blitzed up and cooked out for a little bit. It's not tomato paste. If you were going to use tomato paste, use a lot less than this, maybe a tablespoon. But I prefer the flavour of the tomato puree. I find it to have a lot more natural tomato flavour. So now you can see that started to darken up a bit as well, and all the moisture's coming out, it's getting a bit wetter. It's time to add our wine. Always add red wine because the flavour really goes well with the ingredients, and gives it quite a lot of richness to it. Because we're not using stock or anything either, that wine really helps give it a bit of a flavour boost. And we're just going to allow that wine now to cook out, and once that's cooked out, we're going to add our water and then just let this cook for around 45 minutes, and then it should be right to go for our lasagna. Now we'll add 500 mils of water. And the longer you can leave this to cook, the better, but as a minimum half an hour. But making sure you just keep topping it up with water every time your water reduces down. We'll just leave this now to tick away, and we'll move on to our bechamel. To make it, we're going to need 50 grams of flour, 50 grams of butter, and 600 mils of full cream milk. To begin with, chuck your butter into your pot. Making sure you're not on too high a heat because we just want this to melt. We don't want to get any colour on the butter. Your bechamel sauce is a really important part of the lasagna because it sets really hard, and it's what sticks it all together. I mean, some people can make a more complicated bechamel than this, to put bay leaves and peppercorns in the milk and things like this, but I think you get enough flavour out of your bolognese that you can just use your bechamel for the creaminess of it. So now that your butter's all melted in there, in goes the flour. Don't worry about sifting it in or anything. Just make sure you give it a good stir. And you just want this to form together, which should happen pretty quickly. When you're making your bechamel, it's important to cook it out quite a bit as well, because that helps cook out the flour and it takes the rawness of the flour out of your bechamel sauce. It also can cut down your cooking time by half an hour, because if you don't cook out your flour now, you need to cook it out when your milk's in, and then it takes a lot longer to cook out then. Whereas now we can just do it nice and quick. But you don't want it to change colour. When it starts changing colour, it starts changing flavour. So as soon as you see it change colour at all, take it off the heat. But you can see there nicely that's coming together beautifully. And we just want to start adding our milk now, just a little bit at a time. This will stop your bechamel getting any lumps. So just in goes a little bit, stir it around, making sure it all gets combined. And just making sure you constantly stir it as well. The reason why we have butter in this is because it absorbs all the flour at the beginning, and then we'll slowly release it into the milk as it cooks out. This means you're going to get no lumps. So just letting it come up to temperature. It shouldn't take longer than around 3 or 4 minutes for it to become creamy and thicken up after you've added the last of your milk. If it's taking longer than that, you probably need to turn it up just a touch, or be nice and patient, one or the other. So our bechamel is nice and creamy and thick, and our bolognese is nice and saucy and cooked and very tasty. So it's time to put it all together into the world's greatest lasagna. I've already hit one hurdle though, because my square dish had sticky date in it the other day for a friend, and it hasn't been returned, so we're going to use a circle one today, but it doesn't matter. We're going to use fresh pasta sheets as well. You can buy smaller versions of these in any of the supermarkets. So always you have to trim your lasagna sheets, even with a square dish. Of course today it's a little bit more important, but just following it around. You don't have to be too exact with this. So running your knife around, and that should do it. To begin with, we have 250 grams of grated mozzarella cheese, and we have just 80 grams of shredded Parmesan cheese there. The first layer always is the bolognese sauce. So just coating it there. So for this first layer, no bechamel and no cheese, just straight on with the pasta sheets. So in that goes, tuck it in nicely. Starting off again with the bolognese. Making sure you coat it all the way around. And you want it to be still nice and saucy, because these pasta sheets aren't cooked. So when pasta normally cooks in water, it's the water that's absorbed into it that makes it soft and it makes it cooked. Whereas with this lasagna, it's going to be all the juices from the bolognese, so all that flavour's not lost, and there's no water in there dulling it out. It's going to be absolutely full of flavour. Bolognese is in though. Next, we're just going to put a little bit of bechamel over, just spreading it around. You don't need everywhere coated. Now some of your mozzarella. This mozzarella cheese helps to stick all your layers together, and just some parmesan for the beautiful flavour. And so then on to our next layer, and we'll do exactly the same. You don't want any pasta showing whatsoever on this last layer, or it's going to burn long before your lasagna's cooked. So now with this final one, be quite generous with your bechamel. Get it all on there. And this is what gives it a really nice creamy top to it. And when you stick your fork in, it's the first bit you're going to get. It also means with this top layer like this, when it comes to reheating your lasagna, it stops it from burning and that, and it also keeps it nice and creamy. So now that that's completely covered like that, plenty of cheese, nice and generous. Plenty of parmesan as well. And now I'm going to put this into the oven at 160 degrees for around an hour. It should be nice and golden and crispy on top, and then pull it out, but let it sit for at least 2 hours before you serve it. This will give it a chance to all set together, and it'll stop it just collapsing when you go to cut a slice out. But while our lasagna's cooking, I reckon I've got time to show you a few more things. Starting off after the break with something I learnt to make in the restaurant, probably the first thing I brought back into my home kitchen, veal saltimbocca.